Clara West pressed both hands flat against the closed door and felt it a trembling so faint most people would have mistaken it for the wind. But Clara had grown up listening for things no one else wanted to hear. And what she heard on the other side of that door was a child trying very hard not to cry. She had arrived in Wyoming that morning as a bride. She had stepped off a stagecoach into a man's world, into a stranger's home, into a life she had not chosen. But none of that mattered now, because on the other side of that door something was terribly wrong, and every bone in Clara's body knew it. If this story already has your heart pounding, don't go anywhere. Subscribe to this channel right now, hit that notification bell and follow every single part of Clara's story to the very end. And drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning. The stagecoach rocked and groaned like a dying animal as it rolled into Holloway Ranch, and Clara West sat with her hands folded in her lap and her spine straight as a fence post. Because if she let herself slump, if she let herself breathe wrong, she was going to come apart at the seams. She was 26 years old. She had never been to Wyoming. She had never met Jackson Holloway. And in approximately 3 days, she was going to marry him. Her father had arranged it by letter. 6 months of correspondence names exchanged, a photograph sent a stiff, unsmiling man with dark eyes and broad shoulders standing in front of a barn that looked like it might not survive the winter. Clara had studied that photograph for a long time. She had looked for something kind in his face and told herself she'd found it because the alternative was too frightening to sit with. The stagecoach stopped. The driver called down from above. "Holloway Ranch, miss. End of the line." Clara picked up her bag and stepped out into the heat. The sun hit her like a flat iron. The land stretched out in every direction, dry and brown and vast, with the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful so much as it felt watching. Like the land itself was holding its breath. She straightened her dress. She lifted her chin. And then the front door of the ranch house opened, and Jackson Holloway walked out. He was taller than the photograph suggested. Thinner, too, in a way that read less like lean and more like worn. He had the kind of face that had once been handsome, and was now just tired, deep lines around his mouth, eyes that moved over her without warmth or welcome, like he was assessing livestock and finding her adequate. He stopped about 10 feet away and removed his hat. "Miss West," he said. "Mr. Holloway," she said. That was it. That was the whole greeting. He turned and walked back toward the house, and after a beat that felt like swallowing glass, Clara followed him. Inside the house was dim and close-smelling wood smoke, old grease. Something else underneath that she couldn't name yet. Something sweet and wrong that made the back of her throat tighten. She set her bag down near the door. "You'll sleep in the room at the end of the hall," Jackson said, not looking at her. "We'll ride to town day after tomorrow. Preacher's already been notified." "I see," Clara said. "You eat whatever you find in the kitchen. I'm not much for sitting down to supper." "All right. I've got a daughter, Lily. She's 8. She's been sick." Something shifted in his voice when he said it. The flatness cracked just for a second, and underneath was something raw and frightened that he'd clearly been working very hard to bury. "I'm sorry to hear that," Clara said. "What kind of sick?" "The kind that doesn't get better quick." He moved toward the hallway. "She's resting. You'll meet her tomorrow." "May I meet her tonight?" He stopped, turned, looked at her like she'd said something unexpected. "She needs her rest," he said. "Of course," Clara said. I'd like to know who I'll be caring for, if that's all right." He studied her for a moment. His jaw worked like he was chewing on something he hadn't decided to spit out yet. "Tomorrow," he said again. Then he walked down the hall and disappeared into the dark. Clara stood in the middle of the front room alone in a stranger's house, 500 miles from anything she'd ever known. She breathed in through her nose. The sweet smell was stronger here, faint but persistent the way a lie always is when you're close enough to it. She didn't know what it was yet, but she didn't like it. She found her room at the end of the hall. She unpacked her small bag with methodical hands. She changed out of her travel clothes. She lay down on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe around her. And somewhere down the hall, faint as a whisper, she heard it. A child. Crying. Not loudly. Not the crying of a child throwing a fit or wanting something. This was quiet, careful crying. The kind a person does when they've learned that making too much noise brings trouble. Clara sat up. She sat there for a long moment listening. The crying stopped. Started again. Stopped. She got up, put her feet on the floor, and walked toward the sound. There was a door at the far end of the hall she hadn't noticed before, smaller than the others, set slightly back into the wall with a strip of dim yellow lamplight showing at the bottom. She stopped in front of it and pressed her palm flat against the wood and felt the vibration of small, careful sobs on the other side. She knocked gently. "Lily." The crying stopped immediately, silence like a held breath. "My name is Clara," she said quietly. "I just arrived today. I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." Silence. "You don't have to open the door," Clara said. "I'll go back to bed if you want." A long pause, then so soft she almost missed it. "I'm all right." The voice was small and hoarse, and did not sound all right in the least. "Okay," Clara said. "I'm glad. Good night, Lily." She went back to bed. She lay there in the dark for a long time, listening to the house, to the wind outside, to the distant sound of Jackson moving around in his room, unable to sleep, same as her. The sweet smell drifted under her door. She didn't sleep until nearly dawn. The woman appeared at breakfast. Clara was at the stove, heating water for coffee, when she heard footsteps behind her, not Jackson's heavy tread, but something sharper, more deliberate, the sound of someone who wanted you to know they were coming. She turned. The woman in the doorway was perhaps 40, fine-boned and dark-haired, with eyes the pale gray of winter sky. She was dressed well for a ranch, too well, in a dress that fit too precisely, and hands that were too smooth for someone who did real work. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and looked at Clara the way a woman looks at something that has been left in her chair. "You must be the mail-order bride," she said. Her tone made the phrase sound like something she'd stepped in. "I'm Clara West," Clara said. "And you are—" "June Aldridge, Margaret's sister." She let that sit there for a moment. "Lily's aunt." "It's good to meet you," Clara said. "I didn't know you lived here." "I've been here since Margaret died," June said. "Somebody had to keep this house running." She moved to the table and sat down like she owned it. "Jackson needed help with Lily. I've been giving it." "That's very kind of you. It's family." June's eyes moved over Clara slowly, deliberately, like she was cataloging her and finding her lacking. "You're younger than I expected." "I'm 26. Still." June tilted her head. "It's a hard life out here. Women from back east don't usually last." Clara poured the coffee carefully. "I'm not from back east. I'm from Ohio. Same thing." June accepted the cup Clara placed in front of her without a word of thanks. "Don't expect Jackson to make it easy for you. He's a grieving man. He doesn't need company. He needs help. That's why he sent for you." "I understand that," Clara said. "Do you—" June's eyes met hers, cool and measuring. "Because there are ways things run in this house. Ways Lily is cared for. I've established those ways over 2 years, and they work. I'd appreciate you not disrupting them." Clara sat down across from her with her own cup and looked at her steadily. "I'm not here to disrupt anything. I'm here to help." June smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Good. Then we understand each other." They did not understand each other. Clara was quite sure of that. Deb. She met Lily that morning. Jackson took her to the door of the small room at the end of the hall, Lily's room, and pushed it open, and Clara walked in and stopped. The child on the bed was 8 years old, and she looked like something had been eating her from the inside for a very long time. She was small, too small, the kind of small that speaks of something missing rather than something natural. Her skin had a yellowish cast to it. Her hair, which might once have been a pretty brown, lay thin and dull against the pillow. and her stomach. Clara kept her face still. She kept her expression soft and open. But something lurched hard inside her chest because the child's belly was distended, rounded, and wrong, pressing up against the thin fabric of her nightgown in a way that did not belong on an 8-year-old girl. "Lily," Jackson said quietly. "This is Miss West. She's come to stay with us for a while." Lily's eyes, which were very dark and very watchful, moved to Clara. "Hello?" the girl said. "Hello, sweetheart," Clara said. She moved to the chair beside the bed and sat down, bringing herself level with the child rather than looming over her. "I heard you last night. I'm sorry you had a hard time sleeping." Something flickered in Lily's expression. Surprise maybe that someone had noticed and said so plainly. "I'm used to it," she said. "Well, you shouldn't have to be." Clara glanced at the small table beside the bed, where a brown glass bottle sat next to a cup. "Is that your medicine?" "My tonic," Lily said. "Aunt June brings it every day." Clara looked at the bottle. She didn't pick it up. "Does it help?" Lily was quiet for a moment. "Aunt June says it does." Not the same thing. Clara heard the difference immediately. She looked at Jackson. He was standing in the doorway with his arms at his sides, watching his daughter with an expression that was equal parts love and helplessness. The look of a man who has been afraid for so long, he stopped being able to imagine being anything else. "What does the doctor say?" Clara asked him. "Doc Pierce rides out every month or so," Jackson said. "Says it's a wasting sickness. Says the tonic is the best thing for it." "What's in the tonic?" Jackson blinked. "The herbs and such that Doc Pierce prescribed. June makes it up. June makes it herself. She and Doc Pierce worked out the recipe between them. She's been doing it since Lily first took sick." Clara looked at the bottle again. The sweet smell she'd noticed since arriving was stronger here, concentrated, rising off the bottle in a way that made her stomach turn over. "That's very involved of her," Clara said quietly. She didn't say anything else. The first real argument happened that afternoon. Clara had gone to check on Lily and found June in the room standing over the child's bed, measuring out a large spoonful of the tonic. Lily was sitting up against her pillow with her mouth already open, patient, as a baby bird trained patience. Clara thought the patience of someone who has learned that it's easier to just accept what's coming. "I'll do that," Clara said from the doorway. June looked up sharply. "I beg your pardon. The tonic. I'll give it to her." Clara kept her voice mild. "Jackson asked me to help with Lily's care. I'm happy to take this off your hands." "You don't know the dosage," June said. "You don't know Lily's schedule. You don't know anything about what she needs." "Then show me," Clara said. "Walk me through it. I'm a quick learner." June set the spoon down on the table with a small, precise click. Her eyes were flat and very still, the way a pond goes flat right before a storm. "You have been in this house less than 24 hours, she said, "and already you're inserting yourself into things that don't concern you." "A sick child in my care concerns me." "She is not in your care. She is in mine. She has been in my care for 2 years, and she is alive because of it." Clara looked at Lily. The girl was watching the two of them with those dark, watchful eyes, her hands folded in her lap, very still, the way children go, still when they're trying to be invisible. "Lily," Clara said gently, "does the tonic make you feel better after you take it?" Lily's eyes cut briefly to June, then back to Clara. "I feel different," Lily said carefully. "My stomach hurts more, but Aunt June says that means it's working." Clara looked back at June. June picked up the spoon again. "Open up, sweetheart." Clara stepped into the room. "Lily," she said, "why don't you rest for a little while before you take your medicine? I'd like to speak with your aunt for a moment." "She needs her tonic on a schedule," June said sharply. 30 minutes won't matter." Clara held June's gaze. "I'd like a word with you. In the hall, please." Something moved behind June's eyes, quick and cold, gone before Clara could name it. Then she set the spoon down, smoothed her skirt, and walked past Clara into the hall. Clara followed her. She pulled the door nearly closed behind her. "I don't know what you think you're doing," June said, low and controlled. "But I won't have my sister's child upset by a stranger who—" "What's in the tonic, June?" June stopped. "I told you. Herbs. A recipe from Doc Pierce." "I'd like to see the recipe." "It's not your business to see anything." "It is if I'm going to be giving it to her. I need to understand what she's taking. Any reasonable person would want to know that." June's chin came up. Her voice when it came was like a door closing. "The recipe is private, between the doctor and me. Jackson approved it, and that is all that matters." She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, dropping her voice to something quiet and deliberate. "Let me be very clear with you, Miss West. You are a mail-order bride. You came here to cook and clean and give this man what he needs, and try not to embarrass yourself doing it. You are not Lily's mother. You are not this family. And if you interfere with my sister's child's care one more time, I will make sure Jackson understands exactly what kind of trouble he's brought into his home." She went back into the room. Clara stood in the hallway. Her hands, she noticed, were perfectly still. Her voice when she spoke to herself in the privacy of her own head was perfectly steady. But her mind was racing, because she knew that smell. She had grown up in Ohio in a farmhouse where her father kept a root cellar where he stored all manner of things, fertilizer, pesticides, rat poison. She had cleaned that cellar every spring for 15 years, and she knew what arsenic smelled like. Sweet. Faintly, persistently, unmistakably sweet. She walked down the hall to the kitchen. She stood at the window and looked out at the empty land. She thought about Lily's distended stomach. She thought about the look on Lily's face when she'd been asked if the tonic made her feel better. She thought about June's eyes, flat and cold the way she'd said my sister's child. She thought about a ranch, about who owned it, about what happened to a ranch if the owner died, if his daughter died first. She thought, how long has this been going on? She thought, how much time does that little girl have left? Outside, a hawk circled high over the dry brown land, riding the heat like it was waiting for something below to stop moving. Clara turned away from the window. She needed to find the recipe. She needed to find the bottle. She needed to think very carefully about what she was going to do next, because she was new here. She had no standing. No one knew her. And the one man in this house who might listen to her was already half convinced that grief was the only thing left worth feeling. But none of that changed what she'd smelled. None of that changed what she'd seen. And none of that changed the fact that somewhere in this house, a little girl with dark, watchful eyes was being fed poison by the person she trusted most to keep her safe. Clara West had come to Wyoming to start a new life. She had not come here to watch a child die. She walked back down the hall. She stopped outside Lily's door. She could hear June's voice inside, low and smooth, telling the girl to open up. "Now there's a good girl. It'll make you feel better, you'll see." Clara pressed her hand flat against the door. She breathed. Then she knocked, walked in, and smiled. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said pleasantly. "Jackson asked me to come sit with Lily while he needs you in the barn. Something about the east fence." June looked up, eyes narrowing. "He didn't say anything to me about— He just told me just now, said it was urgent." Clara held the door open and kept her smile steady. "I'll sit with her. You go on." A long pause. June looked at her, looked at Lily. Something moved across her face that she controlled too quickly for Clara to read. Then she set the spoon down, smoothed her skirt, and walked out without a word. Clara sat down in the chair beside Lily's bed. The little girl looked at her with those careful, watchful eyes. "Is my papa really in the barn?" she asked. "He might be," Clara said honestly. "I'm not sure. I just needed to talk to you alone for a minute." She looked at the bottle on the table. "Lily, does your stomach hurt right now?" "It always hurts," Lily said quietly. "Since you started taking the tonic." Lily thought about it. Careful. Measuring. Smart child, Clara thought. Very, very smart child who has been learning to measure everything very carefully for a very long time. Since before, Lily said at last. But worse after. Clara looked at the bottle. Okay, she said. I'm going to talk to your papa tonight. Is that all right with you? Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said so softly, Clara almost missed it. She said if I said anything, I'd have to go away. Clara's heart cracked clean down the middle. She reached out and took the little girl's hand, and Lily's fingers curled around hers with the desperate, grateful grip of someone who had been waiting a very long time for someone safe to hold on to. Nobody's sending you anywhere, Clara said. Her voice was steady, fierce, and steady. Not on my watch. Do you understand me? Lily looked at her, and for the first time since Clara had walked into this house, something in the child's face shifted, not quite hope, because hope was a thing this girl had been learning to ration, but the beginning of something. The very first crack of light through a door that had been shut for a very long time. Okay, Lily whispered. Okay, Clara said back. Outside, the hawk was still circling, and inside the house, something had just changed. That evening, Clara waited. She waited until supper was done, and the dishes were cleared, and June had retired to her room with a cup of tea and a look on her face that said she hadn't forgotten what happened in the hallway. Not for 1 second. She waited until Jackson had pushed back from the table and walked out to the porch the way he apparently did every night alone, the way a man does when silence is the only company he's learned to trust. Then Clara wiped her hands on her apron, set it on the counter, and walked outside after him. He was standing at the porch rail with his back to her, looking out at the dark land. He had a cup of coffee in his hand that he wasn't drinking. Mr. Holloway, Clara said. Jackson, he said without turning. Reckon you can call me Jackson, seeing as we're getting married day after tomorrow. Jackson. She came to stand beside him, close enough to speak quietly, far enough to respect whatever wall he'd built around himself. I need to talk to you about Lily. He was quiet for a moment. What about her? I think her tonic is making her worse. He turned then, not fast, slowly, the way a man turns when he's heard something he doesn't want to have heard. What are you talking about? I think whatever is in that bottle June gives her every day is hurting her, not helping her. Clara kept her voice level. Her stomach pain gets worse after she takes it, not better. She told me so herself. She's a sick child, Jackson said. Medicine isn't always comfortable. This is different. Clara turned to face him fully. Jackson, I grew up on a farm. My father kept a root cellar. We stored all manner of things down there. Fertilizers, pesticides, rat poison. She held his eyes. I know what arsenic smells like, and that tonic smells like arsenic. The silence that followed was so complete, she could hear the horses shifting in the barn. Then Jackson said very quietly, That is an extraordinarily serious accusation. I know it is. You're accusing my late wife's sister of poisoning a child. I'm telling you what I smelled and what Lily told me. I'm asking you to take it seriously enough to have someone check. She pressed forward, holding his gaze. When is the last time Doc Pierce examined her himself? Not just approved the tonic, actually examined her hands-on. Jackson's jaw tightened. He rides out regular. When was the last time? A pause. A long one. 6 weeks, maybe. He's been busy. 6 weeks, Clara said quietly. June sends him reports. Updates on her condition. June writes the reports, Clara said. June makes the tonic. June controls everything Lily takes in and everything Doc Pierce hears about how she's doing. She let that sit for a moment. Does that not trouble you even a little? Jackson set his coffee cup down hard on the railing. June loved her sister. She loves Lily. She has been here every single day. She has given up her own life. I'm not saying she doesn't love Lily. Clara kept her voice even. I'm saying I smelled something in that bottle that should not be in medicine for a child. I'm asking you to find out if I'm wrong. That's all. Just find out. He looked at her. His face was hard and closed, but behind his eyes something was moving, something frightened that he was working very hard to keep still. "You've been in this house one day," he said. "I have. You don't know this family. I don't. And you're standing here telling me that the woman who has cared for my daughter for 2 years is poisoning her." "I'm standing here telling you that I'm worried," Clara said, "and that I think Lily deserves someone to be worried enough to make sure." He didn't say anything. The night was very dark around them, and the stars were very bright, and somewhere inside the house, a floorboard creaked, the particular creak that Clara had already learned belonged to the hallway outside Lily's room. She and Jackson both heard it. His head came up. "Who's moving around in there?" he said low. Clara turned and went back inside quickly, Jackson right behind her. The hallway was empty when they entered, but the light under Lily's door was lit. Clara crossed to it in 3 strides and pushed it open. June was standing at the bedside table. The bottle was in her hand. Lily was sitting up in bed, mouth already open. "Stop," Clara said. The word came out harder than she'd intended. Sharp enough that June actually flinched. Then she recovered, and her face arranged itself back into something composed and cold. "It's her evening dose," June said. "She hasn't had it." "She's not having it tonight," Clara said. She stepped into the room. "Put the bottle down." "Who in God's name do you think you are?" "I said put it down." They stared at each other across the small room. Lily sat frozen between them, her hands balled in the blanket at her lap, her eyes going from Clara to June and back. Then Jackson's voice came from the doorway, slow and very flat. "June, put the bottle down." A long pause. June set the bottle on the table. Her hand was perfectly steady. Her expression was perfectly controlled. But something in her eyes, for just a flash, for just one unguarded second, was something ugly and afraid. "Jackson," she said, turning to him, voice warm and reasonable. "Whatever she's told you, she doesn't understand Lily's condition. She's been here a day. I have been here 2 years." "I know how long you've been here," Jackson said. He walked to the table and picked up the bottle, looked at it, turned it in his hands. "What's in this, June?" "What Doc Pierce prescribed. You know that. Tell me the ingredients." "It's—" June stopped, just for a heartbeat. "It's a combination of herbs. Valerian for sleep, gentian for appetite, some bitters." "Does it smell sweet?" Jackson said. "Like sweet kind of faint. That kind of sweet." June's chin came up. "Valerian root has a naturally sweet." "That's not valerian root," Clara said quietly. "You are not a doctor," June snapped. "You are not anything here. You are a mail-order bride who has been in this house 24 hours, and you are standing in my niece's room making accusations that could tear this family apart." "If I'm wrong," Clara said, "then have Doc Pierce examine the bottle. Tomorrow. Tonight Lily doesn't take the tonic. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize to you in front of the whole town." Silence. Lily spoke. It was very small, very careful. The voice of a child who has learned to weigh every word before it leaves her mouth. "My stomach hurts less today," she said. "I didn't take it this afternoon. Aunt June, my stomach hurt less." The room went perfectly still. June turned to look at the child, and in that moment, in the single, unguarded second before she could arrange her face again, Clara saw something cross June's expression that she would not forget for the rest of her life. Not love, not guilt, not even fear. Calculation. Pure cold calculation. "You're confused, sweetheart," June said softly. "You were resting this afternoon. Of course you felt better. I know what I felt," Lily said. She said it simply, plainly, without drama. Just a child stating a fact she was completely certain of, in the clear, certain way of children who have been disbelieved so long that the truth has become something they guard very carefully. Jackson looked at his daughter, then at the bottle in his hand, then at June. "Get out of this room," he said. June's face went very still. "Jackson, I need to think." His voice was quiet, dangerous in its quietness. "Get out. We'll talk in the morning." June looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Clara. Her eyes were pale and cold and absolutely steady. "You've made a terrible mistake," she said to Clara, barely above a whisper. Then she walked out. Clara let out the breath she'd been holding. She crossed to Lily and sat down on the edge of the bed and took the child's hands in hers. They were cold. Lily's whole body was trembling with the faint, constant tremor of someone who had been afraid for so long it had become her resting state. "You did good," Clara said. "That was brave what you just said." "Is she going to be angry at me?" Lily asked. "She's going to be angry at me," Clara said honestly. "Don't worry about that." Jackson set the bottle down on the far table, away from the bed, away from Lily, and pulled up the chair and sat heavily in it. He looked at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time in a long time, and what he saw was hurting him in a way he wasn't sure how to hold. "Lily Bug," he said. His voice broke slightly on the name, a father's name for his little girl. "How long have you felt worse after the tonic?" Lily thought about it. "A long time," she said. "Since the beginning, kind of." "I didn't say anything because Aunt June said it meant it was working and I wanted to get better." A pause. "And she said if I complained the medicine would stop and I'd never get better at all." Jackson closed his eyes. He sat like that for a moment. Just sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands locked together and his eyes closed, and Clara watched him absorb something that no parent should ever have to absorb. Then he opened his eyes and looked at Clara. "First thing tomorrow," he said, "I ride to town. I get Doc Pierce. I have him look at this bottle and look at Lily." A pause. "If you're right." "I know," Clara said. "And if you're wrong." "I know that too," Clara said. "I'm not wrong." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his daughter, and something moved across his face. Grief, guilt, the terrible love of a father who has failed to see, and he reached out and very gently tucked the blanket around Lily's thin legs. "Try to sleep," he told her. "I'll be right out in the hall." "Papa," Lily said, "don't let her give me any more." "I won't," he said. "I promise." She lay back against her pillow. And within 10 minutes, exhausted and in less pain than she'd been in longer than she could remember, she was asleep. Clara slipped out of the room. Jackson was in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, staring at the floor. "She's sleeping," Clara said. He nodded. They stood in silence for a moment. 2 years, he said, very quietly. More to himself than to her. 2 years she's been getting worse, and I thought it was the sickness. I thought... He stopped. His jaw was working. Doc Pierce kept saying some children just decline slow. I thought that was just how it was going to go. You trusted your family, Clara said. That's not a failure, Jackson. It feels like one. Yes, she said honestly. I imagine it does. He looked at her. It was the first time she realized that he had really looked at her. Not assessed her, not sized her up, but actually looked. Like he was seeing a real person standing in his hallway for the first time. Why do you care? He said. Not unkindly, just honestly bewildered. You don't know her. You don't know any of us. She's a child, Clara said simply. That's enough. He was quiet for a moment. Then, go get some sleep. I'll keep watch out here. Clara went to her room. She lay down on the narrow bed and looked at the ceiling and listened to the house. She heard Jackson settle himself in the hallway chair. She heard very faintly June's door open and close, once checking probably. Taking stock. Deciding what to do next. Clara did not sleep. She was lying there still awake when sometime in the small hours of the night she heard the sound she had been waiting for without knowing she'd been waiting for it. A soft footstep. A door handle. A very careful creak. She was on her feet before the sound fully registered. She was in the hallway in seconds, and what she saw stopped her cold. June was at Lily's door. Not just passing, standing at it, hand on the handle. the brown glass bottle tucked against her chest, her body angled away from the hallway chair where Jackson had been sitting. The chair was empty. "Stop," Clara said. June spun. Her face was white in the darkness, her composure completely gone for the first time since Clara had arrived, and in its place was something raw and desperate that confirmed everything Clara had suspected. "Get back to your room," June hissed. "Put the bottle down," Clara said. She stepped into the hallway, fully blocking June's path back to the kitchen. "You don't understand what you're doing." June's voice was controlled fury barely contained. "This is not your family. This is not your ranch. This is not your place. Where is Jackson?" "He fell asleep in the kitchen. He's tired. He's been—" "Give me the bottle, June. If you do not step out of my way right now, I will scream this house down and tell Jackson you came at me in the night, that you tried to steal from the medicine cabinet. I will tell him you're deranged, that you came here with a plan to take this ranch." "You can tell him anything you want," Clara said. She kept her voice flat and even. "Tomorrow when Doc Pierce tests that bottle, it won't matter what you've said." Something shifted in June's face. Something that had been holding together for a very long time began very slightly to let go. "You don't know what you've done," June said. Her voice for the first time had something ragged in it. Not guilt exactly. Something more like fury at being interrupted. "This ranch is Margaret's. It should have gone to her family. It should have come to me. Jackson has no right." "This is Jackson's ranch," Clara said. "And Lily is Jackson's daughter. And what you've been doing to that little girl." "That little girl would have been fine," June snapped. "She would have gotten the ranch. It would have come to the family when Jackson was gone. It would have—" She stopped, heard herself. Something flickered across her face. The silence between them was enormous. June had just told her everything. "Put the bottle down," Clara said. From behind her came Jackson's voice very low. "June." He was in the hallway behind Clara. He had not been asleep in the kitchen. He had been listening. June went perfectly still. "Jackson." "I heard you," he said. "All of it." June's face changed then. The calculation came back rapid, urgent, the look of someone running through options too fast and finding none of them good enough. Then it collapsed. All at once, like a wall that had been cracking for a long time and finally had nothing left to hold it up. June's face crumpled. The bottle dropped from her hands, and something awful and broken came out of her. Not grief, not quite, but something in the family of it. The sound of a plan that had taken years and cost everything finally coming apart at 2 a.m. in a dark hallway. Jackson walked past Clara. He picked up the bottle from the floor. He looked at it in his hand. "Get your things," he said to June. His voice was like stone. "You'll sleep in the barn tonight. In the morning, I ride for the sheriff." "Jackson, please." June reached for his arm. He stepped back. "Don't." She looked at Clara. One last look. And what was in it, Clara would think about this for a long time after, was not hatred exactly. It was something worse. It was the look of someone who had made the worst calculation of their life and was only just now understanding the full cost of it. Then she walked to her room to get her things. Jackson stood in the hallway with the bottle in his hand. He was very still. Clara could see him breathing the slow, deliberate breathing of a man holding himself together through sheer will. "She said the ranch," he said at last. "She said—" "I heard her," Clara said. 2 years. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Lily's been sick 2 years." Clara moved to stand beside him. She didn't touch him. She just stood there close enough that he wasn't alone. "She's going to get better," Clara said. "Now that it stopped, she's going to get better. Children are—" She stopped, then started again. "Lily is strong. You can see it in her. She's been strong through all of it." Jackson looked at her. His eyes were bright with something he was absolutely refusing to let fall. "Thank you," he said. It was a simple thing. 2 words. But the weight he put into them, the raw and ragged honesty of a man who had almost lost the thing he loved most, it settled over Clara like something solid. Go sit with her, Clara said quietly. She should have someone there when she wakes up. He nodded. He went. Clara stayed in the hallway. She listened to the sound of June collecting her things from down the hall, the soft, controlled sounds of a woman reduced to carrying what she could in her arms in the middle of the night. She listened to the sound of the front door opening and closing. Then she listened to silence. She walked back to Lily's door. She pushed it open just enough to see. Jackson was in the chair beside the bed. Lily's small hand in his large one, his eyes open and watching her sleep, with the focused, desperate attention of a man who has just understood exactly how close he came to losing everything. Clara pulled the door gently closed. She went back to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands finally were shaking. That was all right. They were allowed to shake now. The hard part was done. Except it wasn't. She knew it wasn't. There was a doctor who had signed off on the tonic. There was a legal system that would need proof. There was a little girl who had months of poison to recover from. And there was a man down the hall who had trusted the wrong person for 2 years and was going to spend a very long time making sense of that. Clara pressed her palms flat on her knees and breathed. Outside, the first pale suggestion of dawn was just beginning to show at the edge of the world. Somewhere in the barn, June Aldridge was sitting with what she'd done. And somewhere in a small room at the end of the hall, Lily Holloway was sleeping more peacefully than she'd slept in 2 years. Clara lay back on her bed and closed her eyes. There was more coming. She could feel it the way you feel a storm before it arrives, that particular pressure in the air that held stillness before things break open. But tonight, the child was safe. Tonight, that was enough. Jackson rode out before sunrise. Clara heard him go the creak of the front door, the soft thud of boots on the porch steps, the sound of a horse being saddled in the dark. She lay still and listened, and did not go after him. Some things a man needed to do alone, and riding to town to tell the sheriff that his dead wife's sister had been poisoning his daughter for 2 years was absolutely one of them. She got up, she built the fire, she put coffee on, and then she went to check on Lily. The child was awake, lying on her back with her hands folded on her stomach, staring at the ceiling. When Clara pushed open the door, she turned her head and looked at her with those dark, watchful eyes that seemed older than 8 years by a considerable margin. "Papa's gone," Lily said. "He'll be back," Clara said. "He went to get some help." "For Aunt June?" Clara came and sat on the edge of the bed. "Yes." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Is she coming back?" "No," Clara said. "She's not." Another silence. Clara waited because she had learned in the space of 2 days that Lily Holloway processed things in her own time and did not appreciate being rushed. "My stomach doesn't hurt as much this morning," Lily said finally. "It's like it's there but quieter, like when a noise stops and you can still hear it a little, but mostly it's gone." "That's good," Clara said. "That's a very good sign." "Clara." Lily looked at her directly. "Was she trying to kill me?" Clara held the child's gaze. She had thought about this question coming. She had thought about how to answer it. She had decided that Lily, who had been lied to and managed and quietly destroyed for 2 years, deserved the plain truth more than she deserved protection from it. "I think she was trying to make you so sick that she could get the ranch," Clara said quietly. "I don't know if she thought about what happened to you after that. I'm not sure she let herself think that far." Lily absorbed this with the stillness of a child who has already suspected the worst and is simply having it confirmed. "She used to hold my hand," Lily said. "When I was sick, she'd sit right where you are and hold my hand and tell me it was going to be all right." Clara did not say anything. There was nothing to say to that. "I believed her," Lily said. "Of course you did," Clara said. "She's your family. You were supposed to be able to believe her." Lily looked at the ceiling again. "Is that why it hurts more?" "Because I believed her." Clara reached out and took the child's hand. "The hurt from being lied to by someone you love is different from regular hurt," she said. "It takes longer to go away, but it does go away. I promise you that." Lily turned her hand over and held on. Doc Pierce arrived at the ranch before noon. He came fast, which told Clara that Jackson had not asked him nicely. He came with two men she didn't recognize, one of them wearing a badge which told her the sheriff had come along. And he came with the particular expression of a man who has received information that threatens to overturn everything he thought he knew and has not yet decided whether to be horrified or defensive. Clara was standing on the porch when they rode up. She had Lily's bottle in her hand. The doctor dismounted and looked at her. He was a small man, 60s, with the precise clipped manner of someone who does not like having his expertise questioned. "You're the bride," he said. "Clara West," she said. "This is the tonic you approved for Lily Holloway." She held the bottle out to him. "I believe it contains arsenic." Doc Pierce took the bottle. He uncorked it. He brought it to his nose and smelled it. And something happened in his face. A small, terrible change, so brief most people would have missed it. Clara did not miss it. "Doc Pierce," she said quietly. "When did you last examine Lily yourself in person?" "I send regular." "When?" she said. "What date?" "When did you last put your hands on that child and examine her yourself?" The sheriff, who had been watching this exchange with his arms crossed, said, "That'd be a real good question to answer, Doc." Doc Pierce looked at the bottle in his hand. He looked at it for a long time. 3 months, he said at last, very quietly. 3 months, Clara said. June sent detailed. "June sent you whatever June wanted you to know," Clara said. "And you signed off on the tonic, and you rode past this ranch for 3 months while an 8-year-old girl got sicker and sicker. I didn't know." He stopped. "I had no reason to suspect." "I'd like you to examine Lily now," Clara said. "And I'd like you to tell me honestly when you're done whether what you find in that child is consistent with 2 years of illness or 2 years of poisoning." She turned and walked back into the house, and after a moment, she heard them follow her. The examination took 40 minutes. Clara sat in the front room and listened to the low murmur of voices down the hall, and watched Jackson stand at the window with his back to the room perfectly still, the way a man stands when the only thing keeping him together is the effort of not moving. The sheriff, a broad, quiet man named Cole, who had the particular patience of someone who has seen a great deal and learned not to show it, sat across from Clara and asked her questions in an easy, unhurried voice. When had she arrived? What had she smelled? What had Lily said? What had she witnessed June do? What had June said in the hallway at 2 in the morning? Clara told him all of it, plainly, precisely, without embellishment, because the facts were damning enough without any help. When she got to the part where June had said the ranch should have come to Margaret's family, Jackson turned from the window. "She said that," he said. Not a question. "Yes," Clara said. Those were her words. "You should have come to me." She said the ranch should have come to her when Jackson was gone. A pause. "She was planning to outlast both of you." Jackson turned back to the window. "She helped plan my wedding to Margaret," he said very quietly. "She stood up at the ceremony. She held Lily the day she was born." "I know," Clara said. "How does a person—" He stopped, started again. "How does a person go from that to this?" "Slowly, I imagine," Clara said. "And then, all at once." Sheriff Cole wrote something in his notebook. He was a thorough man. Doc Pierce came out of Lily's room 20 minutes later with his bag in his hand and his face arranged into the expression of a man preparing to say something very difficult. He stood in the doorway of the front room and looked at Jackson. "Her liver," he said. "There's significant enlargement consistent with prolonged arsenic exposure. Her symptoms, the stomach pain, the discoloration of the skin, the distension, the fatigue, none of it is consistent with the wasting illness I diagnosed." He stopped. His voice, when he continued, had something in it that might have been the beginning of the rest of his life's guilt. "The tonic contains arsenic. I can confirm it by smell and by the sediment on the inside of the bottle. A proper test will confirm it further. But I am telling you now with certainty, someone has been poisoning this child." The room was silent. Then Jackson moved. Not toward the doctor, toward the hallway, toward Lily's room with the desperate urgency of a man who needs to see his child with his own eyes. Clara stood. "Is she going to recover?" she asked the doctor directly. Doc Pierce met her eyes. He had the grace at least not to look away. "If the exposure stops now, which it has, then yes. Children are resilient. Her liver will need time. She'll need building up proper food rest, no more of the tonic. She will likely make a full recovery." He paused. "She's lucky you arrived when you did." "She's lucky she's strong," Clara said. He nodded. He had the look of a man who was going to have a very long, very honest conversation with himself in the coming days. Sheriff Cole stood up and put his notebook away. "I've got June Aldridge at the county jail in town. Picked her up this morning on Jackson's say-so. This confirms it." He looked at Clara. "Miss West, I'm going to need you to come into town sometime this week and make a formal statement." "Of course," Clara said. "You're a brave woman," he said. "I'm a woman who smelled something wrong," Clara said. "That's all." He put his hat on and left. The first twist no one saw coming arrived that afternoon. Clara was in the kitchen making broth, real broth from bones, the kind that actually fed something back into a body that had been emptied out when she heard the horses. More than one. She went to the window. 3 men were riding up to the ranch. They were not dressed like townspeople. They were not dressed like lawmen. They were dressed like men who had been riding hard for a while and had a particular kind of purpose about them that made Clara's stomach pull tight. She went to the door. The man in front was perhaps 50 gray at the temples with a broad face, and the kind of hands that came from decades of hard work and harder living. He looked at Clara on the porch with the assessing eyes of someone who had expected someone else. "This is the Holloway place," he said. "It is," Clara said. "Can I help you?" "Looking for Jackson Holloway." His voice was not unfriendly, but it was not warm. "Got some business with him." "What kind of business?" "Land business." He glanced past her at the house. "He around?" Something in his tone, the casual confidence of a man who already knew the answer he expected to get, made Clara's skin prickle. "I'll get him," she said. She found Jackson in Lily's room. She told him quietly in the hallway what was outside. His face changed. 3 of them riding horses with the Keller brand. "I don't know whose brand," Clara said, "but there were 3. He was past her and down the hall before she finished the sentence. She followed. On the porch, Jackson stopped when he saw the man out front. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, and underneath it, a complicated kind of wariness. "Keller," he said. "Holloway." The man on the horse Keller looked him over. "Heard you had some trouble up here." "How'd you hear that already?" Jackson said. "Sheriff only rode out this morning." Keller smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Word travels. How's the girl?" "She'll be fine." Jackson's voice was flat. "What do you want, Keller?" "Like I said, land business." Keller reached into his coat and produced a folded document. "I've been sitting on this for a while. Thought it might be relevant now, seeing as your situation has changed." Jackson did not move from the porch. "What document?" "A deed," Keller said. "To 300 acres of the west section of this property, signed over by Margaret Holloway in 1873. Clara watched Jackson go still. "Margaret never signed any deed," he said. "She did." Keller held the document out. "Had it witnessed and everything. Said she wanted to make provision for her family if anything happened to her." A pause. "She signed it over to June Aldridge, who subsequently signed it to me." The silence that followed was enormous. "June sold him land," Clara said quietly, almost to herself. "She signed over land she thought she was going to inherit and sold it to this man before Lily even—" She stopped herself. But Jackson had heard her. He turned his head and looked at her, and what was in his face was the specific expression of a man watching the full shape of something terrible finally come clear. June hadn't just been planning to poison Lily and outlast Jackson. She'd been moving pieces for years. The tonic had been one piece. This deed was another. She'd already begun converting the ranch to cash before the plan had even finished playing out. "That deed isn't legal," Jackson said. "Margaret had no right to sign over land without my knowledge." "Wyoming property law might disagree with you," Keller said pleasantly. "Then I'll take it to a lawyer," Jackson said. "Get off my land." Keller looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Clara with something speculative in his expression. Then he looked back at Jackson. "Don't take too long," he said. "I've been patient. I won't be patient much longer." He turned his horse and rode out, his two men following. Jackson stood on the porch and watched them go. Clara stood beside him. "She sold the land before she was done," Clara said. "She was already pulling money out of this place." 300 acres, Jackson said. His voice was hollow. "The best 300 acres I own. The water access is on that section." "We'll fight it," Clara said, without thinking. "We." She caught herself. "You'll fight it. You have grounds. A deed signed without a husband's knowledge. It'll cost money I don't have." He turned and looked at her, something exhausted and stripped bare in his face. "I rode out this morning to put June in jail. I come back and find out she was already selling the ranch off from under me." He laughed, short and humorless. "She planned this for a real long time." "Yes," Clara said. "She did." "What kind of person?" He stopped. "A desperate one," Clara said. "A person who wanted something badly enough to stop thinking about the cost." He shook his head slowly. Then he went back inside. Clara stood on the porch a moment longer. She looked out at the land, dry and vast and enormous, stretching away in every direction, the kind of land that took everything you had just to hold on to. She thought about a dead woman signing away 300 acres of her husband's ranch to her sister. She thought about whether Margaret had known what June was capable of, or whether she'd simply been trying to provide for her family in the innocent way of someone who didn't know they were handing a weapon to someone who would use it. She went back inside. Lily was sitting up in bed that evening for the first time in longer than she could remember. It was a small thing, just sitting up, just eating half a bowl of the broth Clara had made, just being upright. But she was doing it with the particular brightness of a child beginning to remember that her body belonged to her. The color in her cheeks was still faint, but it was there. Jackson sat beside her and watched her eat with the intensity of a man who had almost had this taken from him and was not yet able to look away. "Papa," Lily said between careful sips. "Is Clara staying?" Jackson glanced at Clara, who was standing in the doorway. "We're getting married day after tomorrow," he said. "If Clara still wants to." Lily looked at Clara. Clara looked at Jackson. It was, she thought, the most complicated question anyone had ever asked her with 4 words. "I said I'd marry you," Clara said. "I'm a woman of my word." Something crossed Jackson's face, relief maybe, or the beginning of something warmer that he didn't quite know how to show yet. "Good," Lily said simply. She took another sip of broth. "Because I like her." Jackson looked at his daughter. His jaw worked for a moment. "Me too, Bug," he said quietly. "Me too." Clara looked at the two of them, the tired man and the slowly waking child, and felt something settle in her chest that she hadn't expected to feel this far from home. But before she could hold on to it, she heard hooves outside. Fast. More than the 3 from this afternoon. Multiple riders coming hard. She crossed to the window. Her stomach dropped. The riders coming up the road in the falling dark were not Keller. They were not the sheriff. They were 4 men she had never seen riding fast, with the urgent, purposeful energy of people who had somewhere they needed to be and were not concerned about who knew it. And the man in the lead, even at this distance, even in the fading light, was carrying something long and dark across his saddle that Clara recognized instantly. A shotgun. She turned from the window. Jackson. He was already standing up. He'd heard the hooves too. "Get Lily down," he said. His voice had gone flat and hard in a way Clara hadn't heard before, the voice of a man who had been in bad situations and knew what to do in them. "Get her off the bed and onto the floor, right now." Clara crossed the room in 3 steps. "Lily," she said. "Come here, sweetheart. Come to me right now." Lily, to her everlasting credit, did not ask questions. She came. And outside, the riders reached the yard, and someone's voice rose up in the dark, loud, deliberate, aimed at the house like a thrown stone. "Holloway, you come out and talk to us, or we come in and talk to you." Jackson moved fast. He crossed to the front room in 4 strides, pulled the rifle down from above the doorframe, and checked the load in one practiced motion that told Clara everything she needed to know about the kind of life he'd lived before grief had made him slow. He was not slow now. Whatever had been dulled in him by 2 years of watching his daughter die by inches had burned clean off in the last 24 hours, and what was left underneath was something considerably harder. "Stay with Lily," he said. "Don't come out no matter what you hear." "Jackson, I mean it, Clara." He looked at her directly. "You keep that child on the floor, and you don't move until I tell you it's safe." He went to the door. Clara pulled Lily tighter against her side. The girl was trembling but silent, that same terrible trained stillness she'd had since Clara arrived, the stillness of a child who'd learned that being small and quiet was the safest way to survive. Clara pressed her lips to the top of her head and felt Lily's hands grip her arm like a lifeline. Through the thin walls of the ranch house, she heard the door open, heard Jackson's boots on the porch, heard his voice go out into the dark, low, and carrying the voice of a man who was not going to be the one to flinch first. "I'm out. Who's asking?" A beat of silence. Then the voice from before, closer now, with a particular texture to it that Clara had heard before. In men who knew they held the advantage and wanted you to know they knew it. "My name's Briggs. I ride for Keller. Mr. Keller sent us to let you know he's reviewed the deed situation, and he's not interested in waiting on lawyers." "He sent 4 men to tell me that," Jackson said. Not a question. "He sent 4 men to encourage you," Briggs said, "to reconsider your position." Clara looked at Lily. The girl's eyes were very wide and very dark in the dim light of the room. Clara put her finger to her lips. Lily nodded. Clara got up. "Stay here," she breathed. "Do not move." She crossed the room to the window and looked through the narrow gap at the edge of the curtain. 4 men on horses in the yard, the way she'd counted. Briggs in the front, big confident with the shotgun now resting across his thighs rather than his saddle, which was a specific kind of casual threat that was not casual at all. The other 3 spread out in a loose arc behind him. Jackson was on the porch with his rifle. He was completely still. "You tell Keller," Jackson said, "that the deed is fraudulent, and I'll prove it in court. You tell him if he sends men to my property again, I'll be the one riding into town, and it won't be to see the lawyer." "Mr. Keller thought you might say something like that," Briggs said. "He also thought you might want to know that June Aldridge has been very helpful, telling the sheriff exactly what he wanted to hear. Real cooperative woman." He paused. "Also told Mr. Keller some interesting things about your situation. About how you're a man who just found out his daughter's been sick because of family trouble, not real sickness. Man in that position." Another pause. Deliberate, letting the weight of it build, might find himself short on funds for a legal fight. Might find it real hard to prove a deed signed in good faith by his wife is fraudulent. Briggs tilted his head. "Mr. Keller's prepared to be generous. He'll pay fair market value for the 300 acres. Give you enough to rebuild what's left. That's a good offer, Holloway. Better than a long fight you might not win." Clara's jaw tightened. Keller hadn't just bought the land from June. He'd planned on the chaos. He'd planned on Jackson being weakened financially, emotionally, legally, and stepping in to buy cheap from a man who had nothing left to fight with. June and Keller were 2 ends of the same scheme, and Jackson was caught in the middle of it. "Get off my land," Jackson said. Briggs was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mr. Keller's going to be disappointed to hear that." "He'll recover," Jackson said. Another silence, long enough that Clara held her breath. Then Briggs turned his horse. The other 3 followed. They rode out slow, deliberately. Slow, the kind of slow that says we're leaving because we choose to not, because you made us, and disappeared into the dark. Jackson stood on the porch until the sound of hooves faded completely. Then he came back inside. He set the rifle on the table and stood with his hands braced on either side of it and his head down, breathing. Clara came out of the room. Lily appeared behind her a moment later, having predictably not stayed where she was told. Jackson looked up and saw his daughter in the doorway, and his face did something complicated and quiet. "Come here, Bug," he said. Lily crossed the room and walked straight into him, and he folded his arms around her and held on with the grip of a man who nearly lost everything twice in one day. Clara stood back and gave them the moment. Then Jackson looked at her over Lily's head, and what was in his eyes was not just exhaustion now. It was the specific sober look of a man who has finally understood the full shape of the trap he's in. "Keller's been waiting for this," he said. "He's been waiting for me to get weak enough." "He and June planned it together," Clara said. "She sold him the land before everything. She needed the money, or she needed an ally, or both. And Keller knew once June was removed from the picture, and you were dealing with the aftermath, you'd be too depleted to fight a legal battle over a signed deed." Jackson looked at her. "How do you know all this?" "I'm paying attention," Clara said simply. "That's all." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've got maybe enough in savings to keep the ranch running through winter. Nothing left over for lawyers." "Then we find another way," Clara said. "There isn't. There's always another way," she said. "Let me think on it." He looked at her for a long moment, like he was still calibrating how much of this woman was real, like some part of him kept expecting her to disappear the way good things in his life had a habit of doing. "All right," he said finally. "Think on it." Tolam. She thought on it all night. She lay on her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and turned the pieces over in her mind, the way she turned things when she was sewing, looking for the seams, looking for where the pieces connected, looking for what held everything together and what happened if you pulled the right thread. The deed was the center of it. Everything else, June's arrest, Keller's men, the legal fight, all of it hinged on whether that deed held up. June had signed land over to Keller that she did not legally own. Margaret had signed land to June that belonged to her husband. In Wyoming, in 1875, the law on marital property was not entirely settled, but Clara knew enough to know that a wife signing away ranch land without the husband's knowledge or consent was not clean. It was not a done deal. What she needed was a lawyer who knew the territory law. And she needed something else. She needed to understand exactly when Margaret had signed that deed and under what circumstances. Because if Margaret had signed it while she was dying, if June had come to her bedside and put a pen in her hand and told her it was something else entirely, then the deed wasn't just legally questionable. It was fraud. She sat up in the dark. She needed to talk to someone who had known Margaret, someone outside the family, someone who had been present near the end. She thought about Doc Pierce, who had been riding out to this ranch for years, who had known Margaret, who had a great deal to answer for, and who was therefore, at this particular moment, very motivated to be helpful. She was at the breakfast table when Jackson came in the next morning with his boots already on and his hat in his hand, and the particular set to his jaw that meant he'd been up before her, which meant he hadn't slept either. "I need to go into town," she said before he could speak. He stopped. "Why?" "I need to talk to Doc Pierce. Not about Lily, about Margaret." He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. "What about her? When did she sign the deed? Do you know? I didn't even know the deed existed until yesterday." "I know, but when did she die, and was Pierce there at the end?" Jackson was quiet. March of 73. She went fast at the end. 6 weeks from the first sign to the end. His voice was steady but careful, with the memory the way you're careful with something that still has the capacity to cut. "Pierce was there. June was there." "June was there at the end," Clara said. "She came as soon as Margaret took sick. Said she wanted to help." He stopped. "Said she wanted to be with her sister." Clara looked at her coffee cup. She was putting something together, and it was ugly, and she wanted to be wrong. "Jackson," she said carefully. Did Margaret's health decline the same way Lily's did? The stomach trouble, the yellowing, the... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Jackson's face went very still. She was sick, he said. She had a fever. The doctor said it was... He stopped. His voice, when he continued, was almost inaudible. He said it was a fever. Did June make her tonics? Clara asked. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Clara had ever heard. Jackson stood up so fast the chair scraped back. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her and his fists at his sides, and Clara watched his shoulders and waited. "Say it," he said, very quietly. "I don't want to say something I'm not certain of," Clara said. "Say it anyway." She breathed. "I think June may have done this before." The sound Jackson made was not a word. It was the sound of something breaking so deep inside a person that it barely makes a noise at all. Just a small, terrible exhalation, the sound of a man realizing that the grief he has carried for 2 years may have been built on something even darker than loss. Clara got up. She crossed to the window and stood beside him close enough that he could feel she was there. "We don't know yet," she said. "That's why I need to talk to Pierce. If she killed Margaret..." He couldn't finish it. "One thing at a time," Clara said. "First we make sure Lily keeps getting better. Then we deal with the land. Then we find out the truth about Margaret." She put her hand on his arm briefly, firmly, the touch of someone offering something solid to hold on to. "One thing at a time." He looked down at her hand, then at her face. "Why are you still here?" he said, not unkindly, with genuine bewildered honesty. "You could ride back to the stage line today. No one would blame you. You came here to marry a quiet widower with a sick daughter. Instead, you got..." He gestured vaguely at the wreckage of the past 2 days. "I came here to start a life," Clara said. "This is a life. It's complicated and it's hard, and there are men with shotguns and a fraudulent land deed, and the very real possibility that your sister-in-law poisoned your wife." She met his eyes. "But Lily is in that room getting better by the hour, and you need someone in your corner who isn't scared off easy, so I'm still here." He looked at her for a long moment. "You are the most unusual woman I have ever met," he said. "Good," Clara said. "Now saddle the horses. We're going to town." Doc Pierce opened his office door and looked at them both, and knew from the expression on Jackson's face that this was not a social call. He stood back and let them in without a word. Clara sat down across from his desk and folded her hands and looked at him steadily. "I need to know about Margaret Holloway's death," she said. "Everything. From the beginning of her illness to the end." Pierce looked at Jackson. Jackson looked back at him with an expression that was not hostile, but was absolutely not going to allow him out of this room without answering the question. The doctor sat down. "She presented with stomach trouble," he said. "Nausea, pain. I attributed it to..." "Did June suggest a treatment?" Clara said. A pause. Yes. She had a tonic she'd made. Said it was a family remedy her mother had used. She asked if I'd approve it for Margaret." "And you approved it." "I saw no harm in it at the time." "Did you smell it?" Clara asked. Another pause. Longer this time. And in the length of that pause was the answer Clara had been afraid of. "Doctor," she said quietly, "did June give Margaret the same tonic she gave Lily?" Pierce's face had gone the gray color of old paper. "The symptoms were consistent with a fever," he said. "I had no reason to suspect..." "Did you smell the tonic?" Clara said again. He stopped. His hands on the desk were very still. "I may have noticed a..." "You knew," Jackson said. His voice was so flat and so quiet that it was somehow more frightening than shouting would have been. "I didn't know," Pierce said quickly. "I suspected perhaps that the tonic was not that it might not be..." He stopped again. "I told June I wanted to review the ingredients. She told me Margaret had already improved on it, and changing the treatment would distress her. And Margaret..." He looked at his desk. Margaret told me she felt the tonic helped. She trusted June completely. She trusted June completely, Jackson repeated. By the time I considered, Pierce's voice had gone very thin. By the time I had doubts, Margaret was already gone, Jackson said. The silence was terrible. Clara looked at Pierce. You're going to tell the sheriff everything, she said. Today, every detail about Margaret's illness, about the tonic, about your doubts. Every single thing. If I do that, he stopped. If you don't, Clara said, then you are an accessory to 2 murders, because that is what we're looking at now, Doctor. Not 1 sick child, 2 murders. Pierce looked at Jackson. Jackson, I am deeply, profoundly. Don't, Jackson said. The word came out like a door slamming. Don't say sorry to me right now. I cannot hear that right now. He stood. Clara's right. You'll go to the sheriff today. You'll tell him everything. And then you'll pray that what you just told us is enough to keep you out of a cell. He walked out. Clara stood. She looked at the doctor, small, diminished, sitting behind his desk, with the full weight of 2 years of convenient blindness finally resting on him. And she felt not compassion exactly, but the particular weariness of understanding how much harm is done in the world by people who suspect something terrible and choose very deliberately not to look at it directly. Today, she said again. Then she went out after Jackson. She found him at the hitching post outside, one hand on his horse's neck, his forehead bowed forward, not quite resting against the animal but close. The particular posture of a man absorbing something that cannot be unfelt. Clara stood beside him. She didn't just get sick, he said without lifting his head. Margaret didn't just die. No, Clara said. I don't think she did. June killed her. He lifted his head. His eyes were red at the edges but dry. She killed my wife, and then she came to live in my house, and she started on my daughter, and He stopped. I let her. I was right there, and I let her. You were grieving, Clara said. That's not an excuse. It's not an excuse, Clara agreed. It's a reason. There's a difference. She moved to stand directly in front of him. Jackson, what June did is on June. What Keller did is on Keller. What Pierce allowed is on Pierce. You are not responsible for the choices other people made while you were trying to survive losing your wife. He looked at her. His jaw worked. But Lily is alive, Clara said firmly. Lily is getting better. Right now this morning she is sitting up in bed at home eating real food, and her stomach hurts less than it has in 2 years. You hold on to that. He breathed. In, out. The deliberate breathing of a man rebuilding himself from the inside. The deed, he said finally. The lawyer. Yes, Clara said. That's next. I told you I have some money, Clara said. Not much, but enough to get a lawyer started. She held up a hand before he could object. Before you say a word, I know this isn't how you pictured asking your future wife to help fund a legal fight on the second day of knowing her. But this is the situation we're in, and I would rather spend my savings fighting for this ranch than have nothing left to fight for. He stared at her. You would do that, he said, like he was still learning what kind of woman she was, and kept being surprised by the answer. I already decided, she said. This morning, at 3 o'clock, lying awake. I decided. He reached out and took her hand. He held it for a moment, not romantically, not tentatively, but with the grip of a man holding something he has decided not to let go of. Thank you, he said, the same 2 words he'd said before, but different now, fuller. Thank me by winning, she said. She squeezed his hand once and let go, and they turned together toward the lawyer's office down the street. And Clara kept her face forward and her stride steady because she needed him to believe that she had all of this under control, that she knew exactly what she was doing, that she was not underneath the steadiness, profoundly aware that the worst part of all of this was not yet behind them, because June was in a jail cell and she'd had all night to think. And June, as Clara had learned, was a woman who planned very carefully for very long periods of time. Whatever June had left in reserve, whatever piece she hadn't yet played, Clara had the certain cold feeling that they were about to find out what it was. The lawyer's name was Edmund Hale, and he had the kind of face that had seen everything twice and was no longer surprised by any of it. He was 60 years old, with a white beard trimmed short, and eyes that moved over documents the way a hawk moves over open ground, methodical, unhurried, missing nothing. He had practiced law in Wyoming for 20 years. He had handled land disputes and murder trials and every variety of human damage in between. And when Jackson laid out the full situation, the deed, June the poisoning, Margaret Keller's men with the shotgun, Hale listened without interrupting and then sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. The deed, he said finally, is going to come down to one question. Was Margaret Holloway of sound mind and free will when she signed it, or was she signing under duress or under the influence of something that compromised her judgment? She was dying, Jackson said. She'd been sick for weeks. Sick how? Hale said. Sick with a fever or sick with arsenic? The word landed flat and hard in the small office. Clara watched Jackson absorb it. We don't know yet, Clara said. Doc Pierce is giving a statement to Sheriff Cole today. He's going to confirm that he had doubts about the tonic June gave Margaret. That the tonic smelled the same as the one June gave Lily. Hale looked at Clara with the measuring expression of a man recalibrating. And you are? Clara West. I'm marrying Jackson tomorrow. He looked back at Jackson. Your future wife appears to be considerably more useful than most future wives. I'm aware, Jackson said. If Pierce confirms arsenic poisoning in Margaret's case, even circumstantially, then we have grounds to argue that Margaret signed that deed while she was being slowly killed. That she was not competent to sign. That June Aldridge exercised undue influence over a dying woman. Hale tapped his desk. That invalidates the deed. Keller's 300 acres goes back to you. Can you prove it? Clara asked. Without exhuming. She glanced at Jackson. Without more invasive steps. Pierce's testimony alone won't be enough, Hale said honestly. We'll need something more, a witness, a letter, something that places June in the position of controlling access to Margaret in those final weeks. He looked at Jackson. Did anyone else visit Margaret when she was sick? A neighbor, a friend, anyone from town who might have noticed the dynamic between the sisters, Jackson thought. The Reverend, he said slowly. Reverend Mills. He came out twice to pray with her, near the end. Would he talk? He's an honest man, Jackson said. He'll say what he saw. Good. Hale pulled out paper and began writing. Get him in here by end of week. In the meantime, I'll file to freeze the deed pending investigation. Keller can't move or sell that land while the case is open. He looked up. This is going to take time. Months, possibly. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes, Jackson said. Clara put her small savings envelope on the desk. Hale looked at it, then at her. That's enough to start, he said. Not unkindly. Then start, she said. Muck. They rode back to the ranch in the early afternoon. The sun was high and mean, and the land on either side of the road was quiet in the particular way it gets when everything alive has found shade. Neither of them spoke much. Clara was running through timelines in her mind, and Jackson was doing whatever Jackson did when he went quiet, processing most likely the same way he processed everything, which was slowly and thoroughly, and with the kind of thoroughness that meant when he finally arrived at something he stayed there. Halfway home he said, If June killed Margaret, if it comes out in trial. It will come out, Clara said. Then Lily's going to have to understand that her aunt... He stopped. She's 8 years old. How do you tell an 8-year-old that the person who sat with her and held her hand and told her stories was the same person who... You tell her the truth, Clara said. Carefully, in pieces, at the right time. She looked at him. But not today. Today you tell her she's safe, and she's getting better, and everything is going to be all right. Because today, all of that is true. He nodded. He looked at the road ahead. I don't know how to do this, he said, very quietly. Not weakness, just honesty. Do what? Any of it. I've been doing everything alone for 2 years, and I've been doing it wrong for 2 years, and I don't. He stopped himself. I don't know how to let someone help. I know, Clara said. I've noticed. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. Not quite, but almost. I'll try, he said. Good, she said. I'll be annoying about it until you get used to it. This time, the laugh was real short, rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a while. But real. Lily was sitting up at the kitchen table when they got home. Not in bed. At the table with a biscuit in her hand and color in her cheeks that Clara had not seen before. A faint, warm flush that belonged to a child beginning to rebuild from inside. She looked up when they came in, and the look on her face, the particular open brightness of it, made Clara's chest do something complicated. I made biscuits, Lily said proudly. Martha from next door brought flour. She said she heard what happened and wanted to help. Jackson stopped and looked at his daughter and said nothing for a moment. He was taking stock. Clara could see him doing it, cataloging the color in her face, the steadiness of her hands, the simple fact of her sitting upright at a table eating food she had made herself. They look good, Bug, he said. His voice was very quiet. Clara taught me to make them. Well, Lily tilted her head. She told me once how to make them. 2 days ago. I remembered. I have a good student, Clara said. She sat down across from Lily. Jackson sat at the head of the table, and for a few minutes in the warm, ordinary quiet of the kitchen. The three of them ate biscuits and didn't talk about deed fraud or arsenic or men with shotguns, and it was the most normal thing that had happened since Clara West stepped off a stagecoach 3 days ago. Then Lily said, Is Aunt June going to hang? Jackson set his biscuit down. Clara looked at Lily steadily. The girl's face was open and serious and waiting, not frightened, not devastated. Waiting for the truth, the way she'd waited for it the night Clara had told her plainly what June had done. There's going to be a trial, Clara said. The judge will decide what happens to her. But she hurt me, Lily said. On purpose. Yes. And she might have hurt Mama. The table went very still. We're looking into that, Clara said carefully. Lily looked at her father. Jackson was looking at the table. Papa, Lily said, and the gentleness in her voice, the 8-year-old gentleness of a child being careful with a parent, was almost too much to sit across from. I know you're sad about Mama. I'm sad too, but I don't want to be sad about Aunt June. Is that bad? No, Jackson said. He looked up. That's not bad at all. Good. Lily picked her biscuit back up. Because I don't want to be sad anymore. I've been sad and sick for so long I can't even remember what else feels like. She looked at Clara. You smell like something else, she said matter-of-factly. Like bread and something clean. Not like the tonic. Clara blinked. Is that a good thing? Lily nodded seriously. It's the best thing, she said. The twist came the next morning, the morning of the wedding. Clara was dressed nothing elaborate, a good blue dress she'd brought from Ohio pressed as neatly as she could manage, and she was standing in the front room waiting for Jackson when Sheriff Cole's horse came into the yard at a trot that said, urgency without screaming it. Clara went to the door. Cole dismounted and looked at her with the contained expression of a man carrying information that needs to be delivered carefully. Is Jackson here? He's getting dressed. What's happened? June Aldridge asked to make a statement this morning, Cole said. Asked for the lawyer to be present. Said she had something to tell the court that wasn't in her original confession. Clara's stomach tightened. What kind of something? Said she has a letter, Cole said. A letter from Margaret, written in Margaret's own hand 3 weeks before she died. He paused. She says Margaret knew what the tonic was. She says Margaret asked her to do it. The world went very quiet. Clara heard Jackson come down the hall behind her. Heard him stop when he saw Cole. What is it? He said. Clara turned. She looked at him standing there in his good shirt, the one he'd clearly dug out for the occasion, his hair combed and his jaw clean-shaved, looking more like a man beginning something than a man buried in wreckage. And she did not want to hand him this. She did not want to do it. But she turned back to Cole and said, "Tell him." Cole told him. Jackson listened without moving. His face did not change. When Cole finished, Jackson said, "Margaret didn't ask for that. I know that's hard to hear." "She didn't ask for that," Jackson said again. Quiet. Absolute. "I knew my wife. I knew her better than anyone alive. She would not have done that. She would not have left Lily without a mother on purpose." His jaw worked. "June is lying." "The letter is forged," Clara said. She heard herself say it and knew it was true at the same moment she said it. "June has been planning this for years. She sold land before the plan was done. She poisoned 2 people. You think she didn't prepare a backup?" She turned to Cole. "She wrote the letter herself, or she had someone write it. Either way, it's not real." "Can you prove that?" Cole asked. Clara looked at Jackson. Jackson looked back at her. "Reverend Mills," Jackson said slowly. "He was with Margaret in those last weeks. If Margaret had, if she'd wanted June to, he would have known. She would have told him. She told him everything." "Get him to the lawyer today," Clara said, "before June's statement goes anywhere official." She looked at Cole. "Can you slow it down? Give us until this afternoon." Cole considered. "I can ask Hale to request a delay on procedural grounds. Buy you 4, maybe 5 hours. 4 hours is enough," Clara said. Jack. Reverend Mills was 70 years old and walked with a cane and had the kind of memory that pastors develop over a lifetime of sitting with people at the edges of their lives. He sat across from Hale in the lawyer's office and folded his hands over his cane and listened to the whole story with his eyes closed, the way a man listens to something he's been half expecting to hear for a long time. When Jackson finished, Mills opened his eyes. "She didn't ask for it," he said simply. "I was with Margaret 3 times in her final weeks. I heard her confession. I will not share what she said to me in confidence." He looked at Jackson. "Except to tell you that what June is claiming is not true. Margaret Holloway was fighting to stay alive with everything she had. She was not asking to be helped out of this world." He paused. "She was asking God to let her stay long enough to see Lily grow up." The room was very still. "Would you testify to that?" Hale asked. "I'll testify to what I know and what I witnessed," Mills said. "I'll let the court make of it what they will." He looked at Jackson. "I should have spoken sooner. I noticed things when I visited, the way June controlled who came in and out, the way Margaret seemed diminished between my visits. I told myself it was the sickness." He shook his head. "I told myself a great many things I shouldn't have." "Will you come to the jail with me?" Clara said. "Today, now, to give your statement before June's letter goes into the official record." Mills stood slowly with his cane. "Lead the way, young lady." What happened in the sheriff's office that afternoon took less than an hour and undid everything June Aldridge had spent 2 years building. Mills gave his statement. Hale presented it alongside Pierce's testimony. And then Cole, who had been thorough in ways that Keller had underestimated, produced something that no one in the room had expected. He put a second letter on the desk. "Found this in June's belongings," he said. "When we searched her room this morning, it was a letter." In June's handwriting, close, controlled, precise, addressed to Keller. Written 6 months ago. It outlined in careful, specific detail the plan Lily first, then Jackson the deed already transferred Keller to move in when the ranch was unoccupied and uncontested. It mentioned Margaret. It said in June's own hand, Margaret was the first lesson. She went easier than I expected. Jackson read it once. He set it down on the desk. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to the room. No one spoke. Clara picked up the letter and read it herself and felt the cold, clear fury of complete understanding settle over her. This was not a woman who had made one terrible choice. This was a woman who had made a calculation cold, Systematic, long-planned, and executed it with the patience of someone who was absolutely certain she would never be caught. She had been wrong about that. "Is this enough?" Clara asked Hale quietly. Hale looked at the letter. "This is more than enough," he said. June's trial was set for November. Keller's claim on the land was frozen pending investigation. Within 2 weeks, with Mills's testimony and the letter in evidence, Hale filed for full invalidation of the deed, and the judge granted a preliminary injunction that put the 300 acres back under Holloway ownership while the case was decided. Keller rode out to the ranch one more time. Clara answered the door. He sat on his horse and looked at her and had the particular expression of a man who has reassessed a situation and does not like his new conclusions. "I'd like to speak with Holloway," he said. "He's busy," Clara said. "Mrs. Holloway." "Yes," she said. Because the wedding had happened the morning after Cole's visit, quiet and simple in the front room, with Mills officiating and Lily standing between them holding Clara's hand. "That's correct?" Keller looked at her for a moment. "The deed is invalidated," Clara said. "Pending the formal ruling which we expect by spring. You're welcome to contest it in court. Mr. Hale will be happy to see you there." He looked at her. He looked at the house behind her. He looked at the land. "June told me this would be simple," he said, more to himself than to her. "June was wrong about a great many things," Clara said. He turned his horse and rode out, and Clara watched him go until he disappeared from sight, and then she closed the door. The first real snow came in October. Lily stood at the kitchen window, watching it fall with both hands pressed against the glass, and a look on her face that Clara had come to recognize as pure, uncomplicated joy. The particular joy of a child who has been sick long enough to understand that ordinary things are not ordinary at all. Her stomach was flat now. Her color was good. She had put on weight in the slow, steady way of someone eating real food consistently for the first time in too long. And she had started running not far, not fast, but running the way children do, when they suddenly remember that their bodies are built for it. Doc Pierce had come out 3 weeks ago for an examination. He had looked at her for a long time afterward, not saying anything, and then he had looked at Clara and said quietly, "Full recovery. I didn't think—" He'd stopped. Full recovery. He had also in the intervening weeks given a complete and detailed statement to the sheriff about Margaret's case. It had cost him his practice. He had closed his office and left town the week before the first snow. Clara did not know where he had gone. She was not certain she cared. Jackson came in from the barn, stamping snow from his boots, and Lily turned from the window and launched herself at him with a force that made him grunt and catch her and spin her. Once laughing a real laugh, the kind Clara had been hearing, more of the kind that came from somewhere genuine and deep, and had clearly been buried under 2 years of grief, and did not know yet how to come out without sounding a little surprised at itself. He set Lily down and looked at Clara over her head. "Hale sent a rider," he said. The judge ruled. Clara set down the dish she was holding. "And the deed is invalidated." His voice was steady, but his eyes were very bright. "All 300 acres. Keller has 30 days to vacate any claim. It's ours." Lily looked between them. "That's the land, right? The land that bad man wanted." "Yes, Bug. And we have it back. We have it back." Lily processed this with her characteristic thoroughness. Then, "Good," she said with the absolute finality of someone filing a matter away as closed. She turned back to the window. "Clara, can we go outside? I want to catch snow." "Put your coat on first," Clara said. Lily ran for her coat. Jackson crossed the kitchen and stood beside Clara. He did not say anything for a moment. He stood close enough that she could feel the cold still coming off him from outside, and looked at the window where their daughter. The word had arrived in Clara's mind sometime in the past month, and had simply stayed there. The way true things do, was pulling on her coat and her boots with the urgent energy of a child for whom the world was improbably becoming good again. "Clara," Jackson said. I need to tell you something. She looked at him. His face had that particular quality it got when he was about to say something he had been working up to for a while. Careful, deliberate, a man who did not hand out words without meaning to. I didn't want you to come, he said. When I sent for you, I did it because I knew Lily needed someone and I couldn't. I was too far down in it to be what she needed. But I didn't want you. I didn't want anyone. He paused. I thought what you'd be was a warm body in the house. Someone to cook and to sit with the girl. I thought that was all I had room for. I know, Clara said. You knew. You weren't exactly subtle. Something crossed his face that might have been embarrassment. No, I reckon not. He looked at her. What I'm trying to say is that I was wrong about what I had room for, about... He stopped, tried again. About what was possible, after Margaret. I had decided that was it, that I'd had my one good thing and it was gone, and I was just going to manage what was left until I was done. Clara looked at him steadily. And then you walked into my house, he said, and in about 48 hours you turned everything I thought I understood completely upside down, and you saved my daughter's life, and you didn't run when it got dangerous, and you put your own money on my lawyer's desk, and you married me in my front room in the middle of a legal crisis. He exhaled. I don't know how to say this right. You're saying it fine, Clara said. I love you, he said. Plain and direct, the way he said everything when he finally decided to say it. I know it's fast. I know that's... Jackson. What? I love you too. She held his eyes. I have for about a week. I was waiting for you to catch up. He looked at her for a moment. Then he laughed that real laugh, warm and surprised and wholly genuine. You were waiting, he said. You're a thorough man, she said. I knew you'd get there. He reached out and took her face in both his cold hands, and she let him, and he kissed her with the particular urgency of a man who has been afraid for a long time and has finally decided not to be. The back door flew open. Lily stood in it, fully coated and booted, with a look of extreme impatience on her face. Are you kissing? She demanded. They broke apart. Yes, Clara said. Lily considered this. Okay, she said. But come outside. The snow is perfect right now, and if you wait, it'll get all crunchy. She disappeared back out the door. Jackson looked at Clara. Clara looked at Jackson. She's right, Clara said. The snow doesn't wait. He took her hand. She took his. And they went out together into the cold, bright morning, where Lily was already spinning in circles with her head back and her arms out, and her face turned up to the sky, catching snowflakes on her tongue, laughing at nothing and everything alive, and free, and wholly finally herself. June Aldridge was convicted in November on 2 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of homicide. The homicide was Margaret. Pierce's testimony, combined with the letter Cole had found in her room, was enough. She received life imprisonment and was transferred to the territorial prison before Christmas. Keller settled out of court, relinquished all claim to the 300 acres, and relocated to Colorado. No one in the county missed him. The west section of Holloway Ranch, all 300 acres, including the water access, was registered that spring in the name of Jackson and Clara Holloway jointly as was proper, and Lily Holloway, who had spent 2 years learning to be small and quiet and invisible, grew into a girl who was none of those things, loud and bright and relentlessly curious, who ran too fast and asked too many questions, and trusted with the careful earned trust of someone who had learned the difference between people who stayed and people who didn't. She grew up knowing the difference. That was the thing June Aldridge had never understood, and the thing Clara West had known from the moment she pressed her hand flat against a closed door and heard a child trying very hard not to cry. Love was not a thing you inherited or claimed or manipulated into position. It was a thing you stayed for, and Clara Holloway intended to stay for a very long time.